Finally, in this series on basic kayak setup, we get to rod holders. And we're going to talk about kit versus do-it-yourself, and I'm going to cover something that I don't think anyone else has covered in these do-it-yourself videos. Stay tuned. Well, since I'm cheap, the first thing I'm going to talk about is cost. I saw that you can get a Propel version of this Scotty mount in Walmart for about 13 bucks, maybe another buck with tax added on. So that becomes the baseline to use to compare a do-it-yourself option. Now, one advantage to store-bought that you're not going to be able to duplicate in do-it-yourself is the ability to adjust the angle of the mount. But depending on where you like it, because how many people go fiddle with this knob when they're out fishing, you've got two different options in terms of PVC that give you either a 45-degree or a straight-out flat horizontal perspective. And that is what no one else has talked about in these PVC rod holder do-it-yourself options. Starting from the bottom, you're going to create one of my PVC utility track adapters. And basically what that is it starts with a toilet bolt or a T-bolt if you have those, and that's going to go into your utility track. And then you're going to use a plug, not a cap, because the cap is rounded, the plug is flat. And you're going to create one of those. I'll show you what I'm talking about here as we get into it. And that's going to be the mount on your utility track. Next, you're going to need some PVC pipe to fit into the plug, into the cap, no, into the plug. And you now have two choices. And this is what I don't think anyone else has covered in all the do-it-yourself videos I've looked at. You've got two different flavors of Y connectors. You've got this kind, and then you've got this kind. And you can see how that's going to make a difference right now. If you like a horizontal presentation on your rod holder, if that's coming up from the utility track, it's going to look like that. Your rod's going to lay flat along the gunnel of your kayak. If you'd rather have a 45-degree presentation, then you need to use this kind. Now, the disadvantage of this kind is that you need to elevate it up above your track, or the butt of your rod is going to bump against your gunnel or against your leg. With the horizontal option, of course, it's going to be laying flat, and you're not going to have that problem because you can pivot it, and it's not going to bump the boat or you, depending on where you put it. Now, how we create the rod holder is the same either way. But let's talk about costs first, because I mentioned that you can get a kit for about 13 bucks from Walmart. And I priced these out, and where is it? This option right here is a little more expensive. It totals up to be about $15.91, with this option being less expensive, and it totals up to being $14.72. So there you go. Is it worth it to go do it yourself or do a kit? Now again, when you do it yourself, you can elevate this however high you want it to be comfortable and not have the butt of the rod hit your gunnel or you. So assuming you want to proceed with do it yourself and not just run down to Walmart or Amazon and get a pre-made kit for 13 bucks, let's proceed. One additional consideration when making the decision between horizontal and 45 degrees is whether you have a pedal or a paddle kayak. If you have a pedal kayak, it doesn't really matter. If you have a paddle kayak, you may want to go to the 45 degree because it's less likely for the rod butt to stick out far enough to get in the way of your paddle stroke. So think about that and where you're going to place these on your boat before you spend the $5 to get either one of these. Let's make the track adapter first. And unfortunately at Milo's, I couldn't get the right sized slip connector, so I had to get one of these threaded ones, and that upped my cost by about $3 because now I have to get this adapter to go on the top that will then allow me to put the PVC into it. Now we're going to do something a little bit different than what I talked about in my normal track adapter video that I'll link up right here, because you're not really going to move rod holders around very much once you decide where they're going to go in your kayak. So we can skip the step that involves gluing in the nut with epoxy, because all we have to do now is drill a hole in here and bolt this down, slide it on the utility track, and then tighten that nut exactly where you want it, and then it's going to just stay there. So let me get that done. Rather than drag you through every single step and waste your time, I'm going to jump right to the end and just explain what you need to do. Here you can see the final installed product, and I'm using the 45 degree. And the key thing to getting this right is making the initial cut right here where your reel is going to fit into the slot. And actually, you're not going to make a cut at all. What you're going to do is, before you do anything else, you're going to drill a hole, maybe 5/8 inch wide, through here, and then you're going to cut down through it. After you do that, it's really simple. You're going to cut a slot in the top, and that's where the rod is going to go to get down into the Y. And then you're going to cut slots to get down to the hole where you're going to do your reel. That's basically it. The next step is to decide how tall you want this sitting up above your boat. You can see I elevated mine a little bit to make sure that it would not interfere with the gunnel. I can get this in where it would not interfere with the gunnel or my paddle stroke. Now, in terms of assembling this, I glued all these parts together, but the part you don't want to glue is where you connect it into your boat, because you're going to want to be able to take this off and put it inside the boat when you store it, especially if you're hanging it. But I have a cover for this, and I don't want the cover won't fit over two of these permanently installed. Now, if you end up using the threaded connection, what I do is I put grease on there to be able to get this on and off easily, because the PVC by itself will stick. Now, if you decided to go horizontal, basically it's going to end up like this. The cuts are exactly the same. The rod's going to go in there. It's going to get connected. And now you can see that that's a horizontal presentation. But if I were to sit here and paddle in this particular kayak, the rod butt is going to interfere with my stroke. So this is appropriate for a pedal kayak, not a paddle kayak, unless you really move it up here away from your seat. I can see how this would be a great advantage for guys that have to deal with moving through trees that are hanging down over the water and things like that. But I don't have to worry about that where I fish, because I fish inshore and there's no overhead cover. So there you go, quick and dirty. Do you buy a kit or do you make it? What am I going to do? Well, since I already made these, I'm going to go with them. But if I were doing this from scratch, I saw just yesterday on Amazon that you could get a Railblazer setup for 18 bucks. Kind of hard to beat that. You got to look for the sales, obviously. If you just wanted to do it, go for it. But if I were going to do it without doing this video, I think I'd just go out and buy a kit, because of the ability to change the angle when I want to change it. What's your perspective on kit versus do-it-yourself? Throw it down below. Thanks.